My son had a wedding, and I wasn't invited. Let me say that again, because even now, 9 months later, it still doesn't feel real. Sorry, Mom, my son Ethan said, his voice tight and rehearsed. It's a classy event, and my fiance doesn't want you there. She thinks you are too dramatic. Dramatic. I sat at my kitchen table, the phone pressed against my ear, and I felt something inside me go very still. Not angry, not hurt, just still. Like the moment right before a glass shatters on the floor, when it's already falling but hasn't hit yet. She says the wedding has a specific aesthetic, Ethan continued, filling my silence with more words, more excuses. And with all the important people from her firm coming, and her parents' friends, she just thinks it would be better if it was immediate family only. Immediate family only? I was his mother. I was the woman who held him when he cried after his father's funeral. I was the one who missed meals so he could eat. But apparently I wasn't immediate enough. Understood, I said. That was it. One word. I didn't yell, I didn't cry, I didn't beg him to reconsider or ask him how he could do this to me. I just said that one word, and then I hung up. If you're watching this video, please like and subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comment where you are watching from. The kitchen was very quiet after that. I sat there at my small Formica table, the same table I'd bought secondhand 23 years ago because I couldn't afford a new one, and I stared at the wall, at the calendar hanging there with Ethan's wedding date circled in red marker, at the photograph beside it of Ethan in his high school graduation gown, beaming at the camera while I stood next to him in my waitressing uniform, because I'd come straight from my shift. I'd been so proud that day. The phone was still in my hand, and I set it down carefully, like it might explode. My hands were shaking. That surprised me. I hadn't realized they were shaking until I saw them there on the table, trembling like I was cold. But I wasn't cold. I was numb. That's when the memories started coming, uninvited, the way they always do when something breaks you open. I was 45 years old when Arthur died. 45, with a 16-year-old son and a 14-year-old daughter, and a mortgage I couldn't pay on my own. Arthur had been the responsible one, the planner, the one with the steady job and the life insurance policy he kept meaning to increase but never got around to. Heart attack, massive and sudden. He was 47. One day he was kissing me goodbye in the kitchen, saying he'd pick up milk on the way home. The next day I was standing in a funeral home, choosing a casket I couldn't afford, while Ethan sat in the corner with his face buried in his hands, and Olivia clung to my waist, sobbing. The life insurance barely covered the funeral costs. I remember standing in our bedroom the night after we buried him, looking at the bills spread across the bed. Medical debt from Arthur's final ambulance ride and hospital stay. The mortgage, car payments, college funds that didn't exist, and 2 children looking at me like I had all the answers. I didn't have any answers, but I had 2 hands and a willingness to work. So that's what I did. I took a job cleaning offices at night. I waitressed during the day. On weekends, I cashiered at the grocery store. I learned to sleep 4 hours a night and call it rest. I learned to smile at customers who snapped their fingers at me and left quarters as tips. I learned to come home at 2 in the morning and still pack lunches for my kids' school day. And I never, not once, let them see me break. I told myself it was temporary, that once they were grown, once they were settled, I could rest, I could slow down. I just had to get them through. Ethan was my baby boy, sensitive and sweet, always worried about me. Mom, you don't have to work so hard, he'd say, and I'd ruffle his hair and tell him not to worry, that everything was fine. I wanted him to have the childhood Arthur and I had planned for him. I wanted him to go to college without drowning in debt the way I had. I wanted him to have opportunities. So when he got accepted to Ohio State, I worked extra shifts. When he needed a car to get to his internship, I took out a loan. When he graduated and wanted to buy a condo instead of renting, I liquidated the small retirement account I'd been building and gave him the down payment. Mom, I can't take this, he'd said, tears in his eyes. Yes, you can, I told him. Family doesn't keep score, baby. This is what love looks like. He'd hugged me so tight that day. Told me I was the best mother in the world, said he'd never forget what I'd done for him. That was 4 years ago. The kitchen felt smaller now, sitting here alone with my memories. The afternoon light was fading, casting long shadows across the floor. I should get up, make dinner, do something, but I couldn't move. Dramatic. The word kept echoing in my head. Serafina thought I was too dramatic. What did that even mean? That I cared too much? That I showed my emotions? That I didn't have the polished, cool sophistication of her world? I thought about the last time I'd seen Serafina. It was at a family dinner 6 months ago before the engagement. She'd arrived in a designer dress that probably cost more than my monthly rent, her hair in a sleek blonde bob that looked like it required professional maintenance. She'd smiled at me, that perfect practice smile, and told me how charming my little apartment was. Charming. Like I was a quaint museum exhibit. She'd spent the whole dinner talking about her law firm, her connections, her family's vacation home in the Hamptons. When I mentioned my volunteer work at the community center, she'd nodded politely and changed the subject. And Ethan had sat there watching her with this look of admiration, like she was everything he'd ever wanted. I'd felt invisible that night, but I'd told myself it didn't matter. That as long as Ethan was happy, I was happy. That Serafina would warm up to me eventually. That this was just the natural distance that comes when your child finds a partner. I'd been wrong. The phone buzzed on the table, making me jump. I looked down at the screen. Olivia calling, my daughter, my fierce, loyal girl who'd followed in my footsteps and become a teacher, who understood what it meant to work hard and sacrifice for others. I answered. "Hi, honey." "Mom." Her voice was tight with anger. "Please tell me Ethan didn't actually uninvite you from his wedding." So she knew, of course she knew. Ethan had probably called her right after he called me, looking for validation or permission or whatever it was he needed to make himself feel better about what he'd done. "It's fine," I said automatically. "It's not fine." Olivia's voice cracked. "Mom, it's not fine. I just spent 20 minutes on the phone with him, and he kept saying Serafina thinks you were too much for the wedding and that you'd understand because you always understand." I told him he was out of his mind. "Livy, don't fight with your brother because of me. Because of you? Mom, you paid for half that wedding. I saw the spreadsheet. You've got your name on the venue contract, the florist, the caterer." "What?" The word came out sharper than I intended. There was a pause on the other end. Then Olivia's voice came back, quieter now. "You didn't know? Know what? Mom, I was at Ethan's place last week helping him organize RSVPs. I saw the seating chart on his laptop. Your name wasn't on it. And when I asked him about it, he got all weird and defensive. Then I saw the vendor contracts in a folder on his desk. Your name is on all of them. You're the one who's been paying for everything." The stillness inside me crystallized into something sharp. "How much?" I asked. "What? How much have I paid for this wedding I'm not invited to?" Olivia was quiet for a long moment. "From what I saw, at least 20,000, maybe more." $20,000. I closed my eyes. $20,000 for a venue I wouldn't see, for flowers I wouldn't smell, for a cake I wouldn't taste, for a day I wasn't classy enough to attend. "Mom?" Olivia's voice was gentle now. "What are you going to do?" I opened my eyes and looked around my kitchen, at the worn linoleum I'd been meaning to replace for 5 years but couldn't afford to, at the thrift store curtains, at the discount brand coffee maker that was older than Olivia, and something inside me that had been bending for 23 years finally snapped. "I don't know yet," I told my daughter, "but I'll figure it out." We said goodbye, and I sat there in my kitchen as the light faded completely and darkness filled the room. I didn't turn on the lights. I just sat there thinking, planning, realizing. Somewhere around the 2-hour mark, my phone started buzzing again. I picked it up and looked at the screen. 22 missed calls from Ethan. 22 calls in the span of 10 minutes, each one more frantic than the last according to the increasing number of voicemails. I set the phone face down on the table, and for the first time in 23 years, I didn't answer when my son needed me. I just sat there in the dark, watching those missed calls pile up, and I smiled. I didn't sleep that night. I sat at my kitchen table until 3 in the morning, my laptop open in front of me, doing something I hadn't done in years. I opened my financial records and started adding things up, every penny I'd given Ethan since Arthur died, every sacrifice I'd made, every time I'd said yes when I should have said I can't afford this. The numbers glowed on the screen in the darkness, and with each line item I added, I felt something cold and hard settling in my chest. Let me tell you what love cost me. Let me show you the receipts for 23 years of devotion. The condo came first. $180,000. I'd given him the entire down payment when he was 24 years old, fresh out of college and complaining about how expensive rent was in Columbus. "Mom, I'm throwing money away on rent," he'd said. "If I could just buy something, I'd be building equity." So I liquidated my retirement account, paid the penalties, and handed him a check. The look on his face had been worth it then, or so I'd thought. Then there were the student loans. $65,000, paid off over 3 years of extra shifts and denied vacations. Ethan had graduated with a business degree and a mountain of debt, and I'd watched him stress about it every time we talked. So I'd started making payments. $500 here, $1,000 there. Until one day I called the loan servicer and paid off the entire remaining balance. "Consider it an early graduation gift," I'd told him. He'd cried. Actually cried. Said I was an angel. The car payments. $18,000 over 2 years for a Honda Accord because his old beater finally died. "Just until I get on my feet, Mom," he'd promised. I was still making those payments when he traded it in for a newer model last year. He never mentioned paying me back. I never asked. And then there was the monthly allowance. $2,500 every single month for the past 4 years. It had started as temporary help when he was between jobs. "Just a few months, Mom, until I land something." But the months stretched into years, and the help became expected. I never saw it as an allowance then. I saw it as helping my son establish himself, making sure he didn't struggle the way I had. I kept scrolling through my bank statements, my spreadsheets, my records. The numbers climbed higher and higher. The emergency dental work I'd paid for, the new laptop for his job, the professional wardrobe when he got hired at the marketing firm, the furniture for his condo, the security deposit when he wanted to upgrade to a bigger place, the vacation to Cancun he'd needed to de-stress from work. By the time I reached the end of my records, the total was $847,000. $847,000 I'd given my son over 23 years. Money I'd earned scrubbing toilets at 3 in the morning. Money I'd made smiling at rude customers who called me sweetie and left dollar tips on $40 bills. Money I'd sacrificed my health, my sleep, my own future for. I sat back in my chair and stared at that number. $847,000, nearly $1 million, and I wasn't classy enough for his wedding. But the money was just numbers on a screen. What really haunted me that night were the other costs, the ones you can't put in a spreadsheet. I thought about the year I worked 70-hour weeks so Ethan could go on a spring break trip with his friends. I'd been so tired that semester that I'd fallen asleep at a red light and rear-ended someone. Minor accident, no one hurt, but my insurance went up and I had to take on extra shifts to cover it. Ethan had come back from Cancun with a tan and stories about parasailing. He never knew I'd spent that week eating peanut butter crackers for dinner because I couldn't afford groceries and the car repair. I thought about the time I needed a root canal but postponed it for 8 months because Ethan's apartment had a plumbing emergency and he needed $1,500 immediately. By the time I finally got to the dentist, the tooth was beyond saving. I had it pulled instead. There's still a gap in my smile on the left side. I stopped smiling with my teeth open after that. I thought about my sister Helen, who'd invited me on a trip to visit our dying mother in Florida 6 years ago. I'd said I couldn't afford it. The truth was, I could have afforded it if I hadn't just given Ethan $5,000 for his startup idea that never went anywhere. I never got to say goodbye to my mother in person. She died 2 weeks after Helen's visit. That's a cost you can't calculate. The apartment I lived in was the same one I'd moved into after Arthur died. 23 years in the same small 2-bedroom with the leaky faucet I'd learned to fix myself and the heater that only worked on the highest setting. I'd told myself it was temporary, that once the kids were settled I'd find something nicer, something with a bathtub instead of just a shower, maybe a little balcony where I could grow herbs. But there was always something Ethan needed. Always another emergency, another opportunity, another just this once, Mom. And I'd always said yes. Because that's what mothers do. That's what love looks like. Or that's what I'd told myself. The worst part? I'd been proud of it. Proud that I could provide for my son. proud that he never had to struggle the way I did, proud that he could have the life Arthur and I had dreamed of giving him. I used to tell my friends at the diner my boy's doing so well. He's got his own place, a good job, a beautiful girlfriend. I did something right. They'd smile and nod, and I'd feel warm inside, like all those missed meals and sleepless nights had meant something. But sitting there at 3 a.m, looking at those numbers, I didn't feel warm anymore. I felt like a fool, the kind of fool who mistakes being needed for being loved, the kind of fool who thinks sacrifice is the same thing as relationship. I closed the laptop and rubbed my eyes. That's when I noticed my phone lighting up on the table. A text from Olivia. Sent 20 minutes ago. I'd been so deep in my financial rabbit hole I hadn't heard it come through. Mom, are you awake? I need to tell you something. Call me when you can. It's important. My heart kicked in my chest. I dialed her number immediately. She answered on the first ring. Mom. Her voice sounded strange, tight, angry. But something else too, sad maybe, or disgusted. What's wrong, honey? I went back to Ethan's place tonight. He wasn't there, so I used my key. Mom, I need you to listen to me and not interrupt, okay? Because this is going to hurt. I gripped the phone tighter. Okay. I found a box in his closet. A cardboard box, shoved way in the back under some old coats. Mom, it was full of cards and letters. From you. Birthday cards, Christmas cards, thinking of you cards. I counted 47 of them. 47 cards you'd sent over the past 2 years, and every single one of them was unopened. The kitchen tilted slightly. I put my hand on the table to steady myself. What? There were gifts, too. The scarf you knitted him last Christmas, still in the package. The photo album you made for his 30th birthday with all those pictures of him and Dad. Never opened. That book you sent about starting a business, the one you spent $100 on because you thought it would help his career, still in the Amazon box. I couldn't speak. My throat had closed up completely. Mom, there was a note on top of the box, in Serafina's handwriting. I recognized it from the shower invitations she'd addressed. It said, keep these out of sight. We talked about boundaries. She needs to learn you have your own life now. S. Boundaries. Out of sight. My cards. My letters. My love. Hidden away in a box in the back of a closet like something shameful. Like something to be managed and contained. There's more, Olivia continued, her voice shaking now. I took pictures of everything because I knew you wouldn't believe me otherwise. Mom, one of those cards was from last April, you remember? When you sent him that card after his promotion with a $100 bill inside because you wanted him to celebrate? I remembered. I'd been so happy for him. I'd spent an hour at the card store looking for the perfect one. The card was still sealed, Mom. The money was still inside. He never even opened it, never called to thank you. And you asked me if I thought he got it, remember? You were worried it got lost in the mail. I told you he probably just forgot to mention it. I had asked her. I'd been worried. And I'd made excuses for him the way I always did. He's busy, Mom, I'd told myself. He's building his career. He'll call when he has time. But he'd had time. Time to hide my cards away. Time to let his fiance intercept my love and lock it in a box where he'd never have to look at it. Time to accept my money while returning my affection unopened. Livy, I finally managed to whisper. Why would he do this? I don't think it was his idea, at least not at first. I think Serafina's been controlling his communication with you for a long time. You remember how his calls got less frequent after they got together? How he always seemed distracted when you talked? How he started saying things like, Serafina thinks, and Serafina says instead of thinking for himself? I did remember. It had been gradual, so gradual I'd barely noticed it happening. The weekly phone calls becoming monthly, then sporadic. The warmth in his voice cooling to politeness. The way he'd started cutting conversations short. I have to go, Mom Serafina and I have plans. Can't talk now, Mom Serafina's family is coming over. Maybe later, Mom Serafina needs help with something. Always Serafina. Always her needs, her schedule, her opinions taking priority. And I'd told myself it was natural. That's what happens when your child falls in love. They start building their own life, their own family. You have to step back and let them. But this wasn't stepping back. This was being erased. She's been poisoning him against you, Olivia said. Little comments, little suggestions. I heard her once at Thanksgiving, remember? When you brought that casserole you'd stayed up late making? She told Ethan in the kitchen that you were trying too hard and it made you seem desperate for attention. I should have said something then. I'm sorry, Mom. I should have told you. I closed my eyes. I remembered that Thanksgiving. I'd been so excited to contribute something homemade to their fancy catered meal. Serafina had taken one polite bite and pushed it around her plate. Ethan hadn't even tried it. There was another time, Olivia continued, her words coming faster now, like she'd been holding them in for too long. At Easter. You gave Ethan that check for $2,000 because you knew he was stressed about some work thing. Serafina pulled me aside and said, Your mother really needs to stop babying him. He's 30 years old. This constant financial support is preventing him from learning independence. It's actually quite damaging, don't you think? Damaging. My love was damaging. My sacrifice was harmful. My devotion was spoiling him. And I stood there nodding. Olivia's voice cracked. I stood there and nodded because she's so confident, Mom. She says these things with such authority that you start doubting yourself. You start thinking maybe she's right. Maybe you are too involved. Maybe you do need to back off. But Mom, you weren't too involved. You were just being a mother. You were just loving your son the way you always have. I heard her crying now, soft sobs that she was trying to muffle. My strong, fierce daughter, crying for me, crying for the betrayal we were both finally seeing clearly. He let her do this to you, Olivia whispered. He let her hide your cards and manage your relationship like you were some kind of problem to be solved. And then he took your money. He took every penny you offered while treating your love like it was worthless. Mom, I'm so angry I can barely breathe. I should have been angry too. I should have been furious. But sitting there in my dark kitchen at 3:30 in the morning, looking at my laptop with its spreadsheet of sacrifices and thinking about a box full of unopened cards in the back of my son's closet, I didn't feel angry. I felt clear, crystal clear, for the first time in 23 years. Send me the pictures, I said quietly. What? The pictures you took. Of the cards, the note, all of it. Send them to me now. Mom, what are you going to do? I looked around my small kitchen one more time. At the thrift store curtains, at the secondhand table, at the life I'd built from scraps while giving my son everything. I'm going to stop being dramatic, I said. I'm going to be very, very calm. My phone buzzed as Olivia's pictures came through. I opened them one by one. There was the box, overflowing with my love. There were the cards, still sealed. There was the photo album I'd spent weeks making, gathering pictures from Arthur's old shoeboxes, writing captions in my careful handwriting, remembering. There was Serafina's note in her perfect, looping script. And there, at the bottom of one photo, I could see the edge of another envelope. The card I'd sent just last month. The one that said, "Thinking of you, sweetheart. So proud of the man you've become. Love always, Mom." Unopened, like all the rest, like my love was junk mail. Mom? Olivia's voice was small now. Are you okay? I smiled in the darkness. That same smile from earlier. The one that felt like something breaking and something beginning all at once. I'm perfect, baby. Go to sleep. I'll call you tomorrow. I hung up and sat there for another hour, looking at those pictures, planning, thinking, realizing exactly what needed to happen next. Because here's what I'd learned in that moment. Being needed isn't the same as being loved. And love without respect isn't love at all. It's just exploitation dressed up in pretty words. And I was done being exploited. The sun was starting to rise when I finally stood up from that table. I had a phone call to make, to my attorney, Mr. Davies. It was time to have a very important conversation about contracts, obligations, and what happens when you uninvite someone from a wedding they paid for. But first, I made myself breakfast. Real breakfast. Eggs and toast and coffee. Not the instant noodles I'd been living on for years. Not the peanut butter crackers I'd eaten standing at the counter to save time. Actual food. Eaten slowly, at my own table, in my own time. It tasted like freedom. And that's when I knew exactly what I was going to do. Mr. Thomas Davies had been Arthur's attorney before he became mine. He was 72 years old now, with steel gray hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. When I called his office at 8:30 that Monday morning, his secretary tried to schedule me for the following week. "It's urgent," I told her. "Tell him it's Donetta Wright, and it's about my son." I was sitting in his office by 10 o'clock. "Donetta," he said, standing when I entered. "I haven't seen you since we updated your will 3 years ago. What can I do for you?" I sat down across from his massive oak desk and pulled out a folder. Inside were printouts of my financial records, screenshots Olivia had sent me, and notes I'd been making since 4 in the morning. My hand shook slightly as I slid the folder across to him. "I need you to help me untangle myself from my son's life," I said, "completely and legally." Mr. Davies opened the folder and began reading. I watched his face remain professionally neutral, but his eyebrows rose slightly when he got to the financial summary. $847,000. He looked up at me over his reading glasses. "This is what you've given him over the years?" "Every penny documented," I said. "I keep good records. I'm a widow who worked 3 jobs, Mr. Davies. I had to track every dollar or I'd have lost the house years ago." He nodded slowly and kept reading. When he got to the screenshots, the box of unopened cards, Serafina's note about boundaries, the gifts still wrapped, his mouth tightened into a thin line. "Tell me what happened." So I did. I told him about the phone call, about being uninvited from the wedding I'd paid for, about the 22 missed calls when something went wrong, about Serafina's campaign to paint me as dramatic and overbearing. "I don't want revenge," I said when I finished. "I just want out. I want to stop funding his life. I want to protect what little I have left, and I want to do it in a way that's clean and legal." Mr. Davies leaned back in his chair and pulled a legal pad toward him. "Let's start with what you're currently obligated for. The monthly transfers? $2,500 automatic withdrawal on the 1st of every month. We'll stop that immediately. You have every right to cancel it. He has no legal claim to that money." I felt something loosen in my chest. "The wedding vendors? Do you have contracts with them?" "My name is on the venue contract, the florist, and the caterer. The dress was a cash purchase." Mr. Davies made notes. "Anything you've contracted for, you can cancel. You're not obligated to provide services for an event you're not invited to." "What about the condo? I gave him the down payment 4 years ago." He shook his head. "That was a gift, legally speaking, unless you have documentation stating it was a loan." "No." I told him family doesn't keep score. The words tasted bitter now. "The condo itself, though. You said you're still making payments?" "OA fees, $300 a month, plus repairs when things break." "Those payments stop today," Mr. Davies said firmly. "The condo is in his name. You have no legal obligation there. We went through everything. The car. I was a CO signer but could stop making payments. The credit cards, I could cancel the ones in my name. Every rope that had been tied around my neck could be cut, legally and cleanly." "There's one more thing," Mr. Davies said carefully. "Your will, we should update it." "I want Olivia as executor," I said, "and I want Ethan's inheritance reduced to 5%. The rest goes to Olivia and her children." Mr. Davies nodded approvingly. "Smart. I'll include language that makes it clear this was your deliberate choice, not an oversight. We'll have you evaluated by a physician to document your mental competency." He made more notes, then looked up at me. "Donetta, I have to ask, are you certain about this? Once we start this process, your relationship with your son will likely be permanently damaged." I thought about that box in the closet, about 2 years of unopened love, about being called too dramatic for a wedding I'd funded. "Our relationship is already damaged," I said quietly. "I'm just finally admitting it." Mr. Davies studied me for a long moment, then nodded. "All right. I'll draft the will changes today. In the meantime, call your bank and cancel those automatic transfers. Then start contacting the wedding vendors." I stood to leave, but he stopped me. "Donetta, document everything. Every conversation, every text, every email. If he tries to fight this, we'll need evidence." "You think he'll fight?" "I think when people are used to a certain level of support, they react badly when it's withdrawn. Be prepared for him to be very angry." I left his office and sat in my car staring at my phone. This was it, the moment where I stopped being the mother who always said yes. I called the bank first. "Yes, Mrs. Wright, I can cancel that recurring transfer." Effective immediately? Yes. Immediately, done. Then I started calling the wedding vendors. The venue first. This is Danetta Wright. I need to cancel my contract for the wedding on the 23rd. The coordinator sounded confused. Cancel? But the wedding is in 3 weeks. We have a no-refund policy. I understand. I'm not asking for a refund. I just want the contract canceled. I won't be paying the remaining balance. Mrs. Wright, we have a balance of $8,500 due this Friday. If we don't receive payment, we can't host the event. I understand. That's between you and the couple now. If they want to keep the venue, they'll need to work that out with you directly. Then the florist. $3,200 in flowers, canceled. Then the caterer. $12,000 in food and service, canceled. By the time I finished, my hands were shaking from adrenaline. I'd done it. I'd pulled the foundation out from under a wedding that had no room for me. My phone rang. Ethan. I let it go to voicemail. When I got home, there was a text from Olivia. Mom, I need to see you tonight. There's something else you need to know. Something else. My stomach dropped. But I texted back, come for dinner. And then I did something I hadn't done in years. I went to the grocery store and bought good food. Real steaks, fresh vegetables, a bottle of wine. While I cooked that evening, my phone kept buzzing. Ethan calling, Ethan texting. Mom, please call me back. Mom, what's going on with the vendors? Mom, this isn't funny. I turned my phone face down and kept cooking. Olivia arrived at 6:30, pale and shaken. She hugged me hard. Sit down, I said, pouring wine. Tell me. She pulled out her phone. I went back to Ethan's apartment, found his laptop open. She handed me the phone. On the screen was a photograph of a spreadsheet titled Mother's Assets, Projected Value. I felt my blood go cold. The spreadsheet listed everything I owned. My apartment, $120,000. My car, $12,000. My life insurance, $250,000. My savings, listed as $45,000, though the real number was $18,000. At the bottom, total value of $427,000. And beneath that, conservative estimate, will need full accounting after transition. Transition? I whispered. Olivia swiped to the next photo, an email from Serafina to Ethan. We need to talk about your mother's finances. She's not getting younger and she's not managing money well. Have you considered whether she might need help? There are legal mechanisms for this. My firm has an elder law attorney. Maybe after the wedding we could suggest she give you power of attorney? We want to protect her after all. Protect her. Protect me. Like I was incompetent. Ethan's response, you're right. I've been worried. She gives money away too easily. Maybe POA is a good idea. Let's talk to your attorney after the honeymoon. I looked up at Olivia. She was crying. They're planning to take control of everything you have, Mom. They're going to paint you as incompetent and take over your finances. There's more, Olivia said. She showed me a text from Serafina to her own mother. The mother-in-law is becoming an issue. Too involved, too needy. After we're married, I'll have more standing to intervene. We're limiting her access. The wedding will make clear where she stands. Then we can start gaining control of her assets before she squanders everything. She should be preserving capital for care needs. We'll fix it. I set the phone down carefully. My hands were steady now, just cold, clear fury. They were going to steal from me. Not steal, Olivia said. Worse, make it legal. Convince everyone you weren't capable. Put you in some bargain nursing home and live off what you'd built. I walked to the window, looking out at my old Honda Civic with its dented bumper, at the neighborhood I'd lived in for 2 decades, at the life I'd built from nothing. They'd looked at my sacrifices and seen opportunity, seen assets to acquire and an obstacle to remove. Mom? Olivia's voice was small. What are you going to do? I turned to look at my daughter, my fierce, loyal, honest daughter who'd never asked for anything I couldn't afford, who'd stood by me when it would have been easier to stay neutral. I'm going to make sure they never get a single penny of what I've worked for, and I'm going to make sure everyone knows exactly what they tried to do. I picked up my phone and called Mr. Davies. Danetta, is everything all right? No, I said, it's not. I need you to draft one more document for me, and I need you to do it tonight. The next morning I woke up at 5 a.m. with absolute clarity. No more confusion, no more second-guessing, no more guilt telling me I was a bad mother for protecting myself. I made coffee, the good kind I'd bought yesterday, not the generic instant I'd been drinking for years, and I sat down at my kitchen table with my laptop, my phone, and a legal pad full of notes. At the top of the page, I'd written, "Financial extraction, complete list." Underneath were 17 items, 17 ways I was still tied to Ethan's life, 17 ropes I needed to cut. By the end of today, that list would be checked off, every single item. I started with the bank. I'd already canceled the automatic monthly transfer of $2,500, but there was more. I logged into my online banking and navigated to the shared accounts. There were 2 credit cards with my name on them that Ethan had access to. One had a $15,000 limit, the other $10,000. I looked at the recent charges on the first card: dinner at an expensive steakhouse, $240. A purchase at Nordstrom, $875. Wine store, $312. All from the past week alone. I clicked report card lost or stolen and confirmed. The card was deactivated instantly. Then I did the same with the second card. 2 clicks, 30 seconds. $25,000 in credit access gone. It felt like cutting anchor chains on a sinking ship. Next, I called my insurance company. "This is Danetta Wright. I need to remove someone from my auto insurance policy." The representative was helpful and efficient. "Of course, Mrs. Wright. Who would you like to remove?" "My son, Ethan Wright. He's listed as an authorized driver on my policy." "I see him here. May I ask why you're removing him?" "He has his own vehicle and his own insurance now. There's no reason for him to be on mine." It wasn't entirely true. I'd been paying his insurance for 2 years, but it would be true by the end of the week. "No problem. I'll process that removal immediately. Your new monthly premium will be $83 instead of $212. I'd been paying an extra $129 a month for Ethan's coverage for 2 years. That was over $3,000. $3,000 so he could drive the car I'd also been making payments on. I added it to my mental tally of everything I was reclaiming. The HOA fees for his condo were next. I called the management company and explained I was no longer authorizing payments. "But Mrs. Wright, you've been listed as the responsible party for 4 years. We have your account on automatic withdrawal. I'm aware. I'm revoking that authorization effective immediately. The condo owner is Ethan Wright. All future bills and communications should go to him directly." There was confusion on the other end, some scrambling to find paperwork, but eventually they agreed. $300 a month returned to me. $3,600 a year, over $14,000 I'd paid in HOA fees for a condo I didn't own and wasn't allowed to visit because Serafina thought my presence was too much. I methodically worked through the list. The streaming services I'd been paying for that Ethan used, canceled. The cloud storage for his business files, canceled. The gym membership I'd given him as a birthday gift 3 years ago that had been auto-renewing ever since, canceled. Each cancellation was a small act of liberation. Then I opened the file folder Mr. Davies had prepared for me yesterday. Inside was the paperwork for the savings account, the secret one I'd been building for Ethan's future. $127,000 accumulated over 15 years of setting aside every spare penny. I'd called it my Ethan's emergency fund in my own mind. Money for if he ever really needed it, for a down payment on a bigger house someday, for his future children's education, for his dreams. I'd never told him about it. I'd wanted it to be a surprise, a gift for some milestone moment when he'd need it most, maybe when he had his first child, maybe when he wanted to start his own business. I'd imagined the look on his face when I told him, the gratitude, the tears of joy. "Mom, I can't believe you did this for me." Now, looking at the account balance on my screen, all I felt was relief that I'd never told him. Because this money wasn't going to fund his life with Serafina. This money wasn't going to be seized under some conservatorship scheme. This money was going somewhere it would actually be valued. I signed the transfer paperwork Mr. Davies had prepared. Every penny of that account was now going into an irrevocable trust for Olivia's children, my grandchildren, ages 7 and 4. They'd get it when they turned 25. They'd use it for education, for homes, for futures built on love instead of manipulation. I sealed the envelope with the paperwork and set it aside to mail. $127,000 redirected, protected, safe. My phone buzzed. A text from Ethan. "Mom, I really need to talk to you. Please call me, it's important." I deleted it without responding and moved on to the next item on my list, the will. Mr. Davies had the updated version ready for me to sign. I was meeting him at 2 o'clock, and I'd already scheduled the appointment with Dr. Reynolds, my physician for 20 years, who would document my mental competency. No one would ever be able to claim I wasn't of sound mind when I made these changes. The current will split everything 50-50 between Ethan and Olivia. The new will gave Olivia 95% and Ethan 5%. Just enough that he couldn't claim he'd been accidentally forgotten. Mr. Davies had included specific language. "This distribution reflects my deliberate choice based on the relationship I have with each of my children and their respective treatment of me." There was more. Olivia was now the executor. Olivia had power of attorney if I ever became incapacitated. Olivia was the beneficiary on my life insurance. Olivia was the one who would make medical decisions for me if I couldn't make them myself. Every role I'd once imagined Ethan filling was now Olivia's, because Olivia had earned it. Olivia had loved me without keeping a spreadsheet of my assets. But I wasn't done yet. There were still the wedding vendors. Yesterday I'd made the initial calls, but today I needed to follow through, make it official, make it irrevocable. I picked up my phone and called the venue first. A manager named Patricia answered. "Mrs. Wright, yes, I got your message yesterday about canceling. I've spoken with my supervisor, and we need to discuss this." "There's nothing to discuss," I said calmly. "I'm canceling my contract. I won't be making any further payments." "But Mrs. Wright, we have a contract. You've already paid the deposit of $5,000, which is non-refundable, but you still owe the remaining balance of $8,500. If we don't receive payment by Friday, we'll have to cancel the wedding entirely." "Then cancel it," I said. "I'm not paying." There was shocked silence on the other end. "Mrs. Wright, I don't think you understand. This is your son's wedding. If we cancel the venue, they won't have anywhere to hold the ceremony. It's 3 weeks away. They'll never find another venue on such short notice." "I understand perfectly," I said. "And I'm still not paying. If my son wants to keep the venue, he'll need to contact you directly and make payment arrangements himself. But your name is on the contract, and I'm breaching that contract. Send me whatever penalties or fees you need to. Send them to my attorney, Mr. Thomas Davies at Davies & Associates, but you won't get another penny from me for this wedding." I could hear Patricia breathing on the other end, trying to figure out what to do. "Mrs. Wright, can I ask, is everything all right? This is very unusual." "Everything is fine," I said. "I've simply decided I'm no longer funding an event I'm not invited to attend." Another silence. Then, quietly, "You're not invited to your own son's wedding?" "No. His fiance thinks I'm too dramatic." I heard her sharp intake of breath. "I see. Well, I'll make a note in the file and contact the groom directly." I hung up and immediately called the florist. A cheerful woman named Denise answered, and I went through the same conversation. Canceling my order, no more payments. The remaining balance of $3,200 was no longer my responsibility. "But Mrs. Wright, we've already ordered the flowers. We've got 200 roses coming, and the orchids, and all the arrangements you approved. The bride specifically wanted peonies, and we had to special order those from." "Then I suggest you contact the bride and groom about payment," I said. "This is no longer my concern." The cheerfulness drained from Denise's voice. "You're canceling your daughter's wedding flowers 3 weeks before the wedding?" "My son's wedding," I corrected. "And yes, I am. I've never, Mrs. Wright, this will ruin their whole aesthetic. The bride had a vision that didn't include me," I said. "So the bride can figure out how to pay for it herself." I hung up before Denise could argue further. My hands were steady. My voice was calm. I felt no guilt, only a strange, powerful sense of rightness. The caterer was next. I'd saved this one for last because it was the biggest bill. $12,000 for food, service, rentals, everything. A woman named Margaret handled the account, and when I explained I was canceling, she actually laughed. "Mrs. Wright, you can't cancel catering 3 weeks before an event. We've already put in the food orders, we've hired additional staff, we've rented equipment. This isn't like canceling a dinner reservation. I understand it's inconvenient, I said, but I'm still canceling. We'll sue you for the full amount. You're welcome to try. My attorney is Mr. Thomas Davies. I'm sure you'll find he's very competent. This is insane. What kind of mother does this to her own son? The question hit something in me, and for the first time that morning, I felt a flash of real anger. The kind of mother, I said, my voice low and hard, who spent 23 years sacrificing everything for her son, only to be told she's too dramatic to attend the wedding she paid for. The kind of mother who worked 3 jobs so her son could have a better life, only to discover he and his fiancé were planning to declare her incompetent and seize her assets. That kind of mother, Margaret. There was dead silence on the other end. Then, very quietly, Jesus. Contact the couple for payment, I said, or cancel the order. I truly don't care which. I hung up. My phone was already ringing again. Ethan. I watched it buzz on the table, his name flashing on the screen. The call went to voicemail. Immediately he called again. I let that one go to voicemail too. He called a 3rd time, a 4th, a 5th. I turned the phone face down and went to pour myself more coffee. It was 10:30 in the morning. In my email inbox I could already see messages from vendors. The venue had sent a formal notice of cancellation due to non-payment. The florist had CC'd Ethan on an email asking for immediate contact to discuss payment. The caterer had sent a harsh message about breach of contract and legal action. I imagined Ethan at his desk, probably at work, checking his email during a meeting. Seeing those messages, the confusion turning to panic, the realization dawning that something was very, very wrong. I smiled into my coffee cup. At 2 o'clock, I met Mr. Davies at his office. The will was ready. Dr. Reynolds had already sent over the mental competency evaluation. I'd passed with flying colors, no signs of diminished capacity, sound mind, clear understanding of my decisions. I sat at Mr. Davies's conference table and read through the entire will carefully, every word, every clause, every specific instruction about how my assets would be distributed. This is exactly what I want, I told him. He slid the signature pages across to me. Then let's make it official. I picked up the pen. Behind me I heard my phone buzzing in my purse. Again. I ignored it and signed my name, witnessed by Mr. Davies and his paralegal, notarized, legal, binding, done. There, I said, setting down the pen. It's finished. Mr. Davies looked at me with something like admiration. Donetta, I've been practicing law for 43 years. I've seen a lot of family situations, but I've never seen anyone handle something like this with such clarity and precision. I had a good teacher, I said. Arthur always said the best decisions are made with a clear head and all the facts. Arthur would be proud of you. I felt tears prick my eyes for the first time that day. Would he? Would Arthur be proud that I'd cut our son off? Or would he be disappointed that I'd let it get this bad in the first place? But then I thought about what Arthur had always said about respect. Love without respect is just dependence, he'd told me once. And dependence isn't healthy for anyone. Ethan didn't respect me. He loved my money. He loved my willingness to give. He loved having a mother who always said yes. But respect? No. Serafina had made that clear. I left Mr. Davies's office at 3:15 and checked my phone in the car. 22 missed calls from Ethan. 22. The voicemails had started calm. Mom, hey, some vendors are saying there's a problem with payment. Can you call me? Then concerned. Mom, seriously, I need you to call me back. There's some kind of mix-up with the wedding stuff. Then urgent. Mom, the venue is saying you canceled. What's going on? Please call me right now. Then panicked. Mom, the caterer just canceled our order. They said you told them not to deliver. What the hell is happening? Call me. And finally, the most recent one, left 10 minutes ago, his voice cracking. Mom, please. I don't understand what's happening. Everything is falling apart. The venue, the flowers, the food, they're all saying you canceled. My credit cards aren't working. The bank said you closed something. Mom, please, just talk to me, please. I saved all the voicemails. Documentation, like Mr. Davies said. Then I turned off my phone completely and drove home. When I got to my apartment, Olivia was waiting in the parking lot. She got out of her car when she saw me, and I could see she'd been crying. Mom, Ethan's been calling me non-stop. He's freaking out. He knows something's wrong, but he doesn't understand what. Good, I said simply. He's supposed to be getting married in 3 weeks. He's panicking. He should have thought about that before he uninvited me. Olivia stared at me. Mom, what exactly did you do? I unlocked my apartment door and gestured for her to come inside. Once we were seated at my kitchen table, that same secondhand table where this had all started, I pulled out my legal pad and showed her the list. All 17 items, each one checked off. I did what I should have done years ago, I said. I stopped letting him use me. Olivia read through the list, her eyes getting wider with each item. You canceled everything? The whole wedding? I canceled everything I was paying for. If he wants a wedding, he can pay for it himself. Mom, this is nuclear. No, I said quietly. Nuclear would be telling everyone what he and Serafina were planning to do to me. This is just self-preservation. My landline rang. I'd forgotten I even had a landline. I never used it. But it was ringing now, shrill and insistent. I looked at the caller ID. Ethan's number. He'd remembered the landline. Of course he had. He was getting desperate. I let it ring and ring and ring, until finally it stopped. Aren't you going to talk to him eventually? Olivia asked. Eventually, I said. But not today. Not until he understands that his actions have consequences. Not until he realizes that I'm not a resource to be managed. I'm his mother, and I deserved better than this. That night, I made dinner for myself. A real dinner. I ate slowly, tasting everything. I washed the dishes. I took a long bath. I put on comfortable pajamas and got into bed with a book I'd been meaning to read for months, and when I finally turned on my phone before going to sleep, I saw the number on the screen, 43 missed calls from Ethan. 43. The reality was cascading now. Every vendor he'd been counting on was pulling out. Every payment he'd assumed would be made was being denied. Every foundation he'd built his perfect wedding on was crumbling beneath his feet. I set the phone on my nightstand and turned out the light. And for the first time in 23 years, I fell asleep without worrying about whether my son was okay. Because for once, I was putting myself first. And it felt like finally learning to breathe. The wedding was supposed to start at 4 o'clock on a Saturday afternoon in late September. I know because I'd had the date circled on my calendar for 6 months. I'd been looking forward to it once. I'd imagined myself in the mother of the groom seat, wearing the dress I'd been saving up for, watching my son promise forever to someone who made him happy. Instead, I spent that Saturday morning at a pottery class I'd signed up for the week before, my first one. I was terrible at it, my bowl looked more like a lumpy ashtray, but I laughed more in those 2 hours than I had in months. When class ended at noon, I came home, made myself lunch, and settled onto my couch with a book. My phone was off. Had been for 3 days. I knew what was happening without needing to witness it. But Olivia had insisted on going. Someone from our family should be there, she'd said, even if it's just to see the truth. I told her she didn't have to. She'd gone anyway. My fierce, loyal girl. She called my landline at 6:30 that evening. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Mom. Her voice sounded strange, tight, like she was trying not to laugh and cry at the same time. It's over, or I guess it never really began. Tell me, I said, settling into my chair. And she did. She told me everything. The venue had threatened to cancel the week before unless they received full payment. Ethan had scrambled, begging his bank for an emergency loan. They'd approved $5,000, not nearly enough. He'd maxed out his credit cards to cover the rest, barely making the Friday deadline. The venue agreed to host the wedding, but barely. The flowers never arrived. The florist had canceled the order after my call, and when Ethan contacted them desperately, they'd quoted him a rush fee of $5,000 for replacement arrangements. He didn't have it. Serafina had driven to 3 different grocery stores that morning, buying every bouquet they had. The ceremony was decorated with supermarket flowers in mismatched vases. Mom, it looked like a funeral, Olivia said. A really sad, cheap funeral. The caterer had demanded cash payment up front the day before. $12,000 in cash. Ethan didn't have it. They'd canceled. In desperation, Serafina's mother had ordered 50 pizzas and 100 submarine sandwiches from a local deli. The reception dinner was pizza and subs on paper plates. The guests were horrified, Olivia reported. These were Serafina's firm partners, her parents' country club friends. They expected filet mignon and champagne. They got pepperoni and soda. The photographer showed up but left after 2 hours when Ethan's check bounced. The DJ never came at all. Apparently that deposit had been on one of the credit cards I'd canceled. Serafina's cousin played music from his iPhone through a portable speaker. You could barely hear it, Olivia said, and he had terrible taste. He played Baby Shark during the cocktail hour. But the worst part, Olivia said, was the cake. The baker had required payment in full a week before the wedding. Ethan had given them a check that bounced. They'd called him repeatedly, finally showing up at the venue 2 hours before the ceremony demanding cash, or they'd take the cake back. Ethan didn't have the cash. They took the cake. There was no wedding cake, Mom. Serafina cried for 20 minutes in the bathroom. Her makeup was completely ruined for the photos. Well, the photos they got before the photographer left. Serafina had walked down the aisle with red, swollen eyes and grocery store carnations. Ethan had looked sick, pale and sweating through the ceremony. When the officiant said, "You may kiss the bride," several guests were already leaving. By the time the reception started, pizza on card tables in a ballroom decorated with whatever free stuff the venue had lying around, half the guests had made excuses and gone home. It was the saddest thing I've ever seen, Olivia said quietly. And Mom, I know I should feel bad for him. He's my brother. But all I could think about was you, about everything you gave him, about how he treated you, and I thought, he did this to himself. I didn't say anything. I couldn't. There was a part of me, the mother part that had nursed him through fevers and dried his tears and celebrated every small victory, that ached for his humiliation. But there was another part, the part that had finally learned to value itself, that felt nothing but calm certainty. He'd made his choices. These were the consequences. They're on their way to you now, Olivia said suddenly. What? Ethan and Serafina. They left the reception early, not that anyone noticed. Ethan said he was going to fix this. Mom, I think they're coming to confront you. My doorbell rang 20 minutes later. I'd been expecting it, but my heart still jumped. I looked through the peephole and saw them standing there, Ethan in his tuxedo, looking rumpled and desperate. Serafina in her wedding dress, her face blotchy and furious. I took a deep breath and opened the door. How could you? Serafina didn't wait for a greeting. She pushed past me into my apartment, Ethan following behind her. How could you do this to us? To your own son? What kind of monster are you? Hello, Serafina, I said calmly. Ethan, congratulations on your wedding. Don't you dare, Serafina spun around, her dress swishing dramatically. Don't you dare act like you didn't just destroy the most important day of our lives. You vindictive, spiteful, jealous woman. I closed the door and turned to face them. Ethan looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. But Serafina, her mask was finally off. No more polite smiles, no more subtle digs, just pure, undiluted venom. You couldn't stand that Ethan chose me over you, could you? You couldn't handle not being the center of his world anymore. So you sabotaged our wedding like a petty, bitter old woman. I didn't sabotage anything, I said quietly. I simply stopped paying for it. You canceled everything. The venue, the flowers, the food. That I was paying for, I interrupted. That I was funding. For a wedding I wasn't invited to attend. Ethan finally spoke. Mom, that was Serafina's decision. It wasn't personal. She just thought I was too dramatic. I looked at my son. Too embarrassing for her classy event. Not good enough to sit with her firm partners and her parents' country club friends. That's not... I didn't mean, Ethan stammered. You didn't mean to tell me I wasn't welcome at your wedding? You didn't mean to hide my cards and letters in a box in your closet? You didn't mean to plan with Serafina to declare me incompetent and seize control of my assets? The room went silent. Ethan's face drained of color. What? I never... Don't lie to me, I said, my voice still calm, still steady. I saw the emails. I saw the spreadsheet listing my assets. I saw the texts about handling me after the wedding. I know exactly what you two were planning. Serafina's eyes narrowed. You went through our private correspondence? That's illegal. That's... My daughter found it on a laptop left open in plain view, I said, and I documented everything. Would you like to discuss it with my attorney? Your attorney? Serafina laughed bitterly. Of course you have an attorney. Probably some ambulance chaser you found in the yellow pages, filling your head with paranoid delusions. Mr. Thomas Davies, I said. Davies and Associates. Feel free to look him up. I believe his firm has argued before the state Supreme Court several times. Hardly an ambulance chaser. Ethan sank onto my couch, his head in his hands. Mom, I don't understand. Why are you doing this? I'm not doing anything, Ethan. I'm simply no longer funding a life that has no room for me. You taught me something important. You taught me that being needed isn't the same as being loved. I do love you. You love my money, I said. You love my willingness to give you everything while asking nothing in return. You love having a mother who works herself to exhaustion so you can have things you haven't earned. But me? Danetta, the person? The woman who sacrificed everything for you? You couldn't even be bothered to open my cards. He looked up at me, tears streaming down his face. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, Serafina said. Don't blame this on me, Serafina shrieked. I'm not the one who raised a son to be completely dependent on Mommy's wallet. I'm not the one who spoiled him into incompetence. I looked at her, really looked at her for the first time. This woman who'd seen my son and seen opportunity, who'd isolated him from me systematically and deliberately, who'd planned to take everything I'd worked for and call it protection. Get out of my home, I said quietly. We're not done. Yes, I said, walking to the door and opening it. We are. You came here for money, but I don't have any to give you. You came here for an apology, but I don't owe you one. You came here thinking you could bully me or guilt me or manipulate me back into funding your lives. But that woman, the one who always said yes, who always gave more, who always put you first, she doesn't exist anymore. Now get out. Serafina stormed out, her dress catching on the doorframe. Ethan stood slowly, looking at me with something like disbelief. Mom, please. I know I messed up, but you're my mother. I'm supposed to what? I asked. Love you unconditionally? I do. But love doesn't mean letting you use me. Love doesn't mean funding my own erasure from your life. Love doesn't mean watching you plan to steal my autonomy and calling it care. I never wanted to hurt you, he whispered. Then you should have made different choices, I said. The door is open, Ethan, but I won't beg you to walk back through it, and I won't pay for the privilege of being your mother anymore. If you want a relationship with me, it has to be real. No more money, no more rescue, just us. If that's even something you want. He stood there for a long moment, searching my face for something. Then he turned and left without another word. I closed the door and leaned against it, my legs suddenly shaky. It was done. Really done. I waited for the guilt to come, for the voice that usually told me I was a terrible mother, that I should run after him and fix it and make it all better. But that voice was quiet. All I felt was tired and strangely, impossibly, at peace. The social media warfare started the next day. Serafina posted a long, emotional message about toxic parents who sabotage their children's happiness out of jealousy and control. She painted herself as a victim, Ethan as a devoted son tormented by an unstable mother. The post got hundreds of sympathetic comments. Olivia responded with a single post, a photo of herself and me at the pottery class, both of us laughing, covered in clay. The caption read, "Proud of women who know their worth and aren't afraid to protect it. Love you, Mom." She didn't mention Ethan. She didn't need to. The extended family divided. My sister called to yell at me for 20 minutes about family loyalty. Arthur's brother sent me a check for $500 and a note that said, "Arthur would be proud. Use this for yourself." My cousin posted her own story about loaning her son money she'd never seen again, and how my situation had inspired her to set boundaries too. Mr. Davies handled the legal threats. Ethan's attorney, probably someone Serafina knew from her firm, sent a letter demanding I honor my moral obligations to fund the wedding. Mr. Davies sent back copies of the emails and texts Olivia had found, along with a polite suggestion that they reconsider their position unless they wanted those documents to become public record in a lawsuit. The threats stopped. 9 months later, my life looks nothing like it did before. I wake up in the same small apartment, but it feels different now, lighter. Like I'm living in it instead of just existing between shifts. The condo, Ethan's condo, the one I'd bought the down payment for, is being rented out now. He couldn't afford the mortgage and the HOA fees without my help, and after the wedding disaster, his credit was destroyed. He'd called me, desperate, asking what to do. I'd told him to list it as a rental. I'd even helped him find a property manager, a real one, professional, not me swooping in to fix everything. The rent covers his costs with a little left over. I don't take any of it. It's his problem to manage. But at least he has a roof over his head. I took the money I'd been sending him every month, that $2,500, and I spend it on myself now. Last month I bought a new coat, a real winter coat from an actual store, not a thrift shop. It's deep red and warm and beautiful. I wear it to my pottery classes, which I take every Saturday morning. I'm getting better. My bowls are actually round now. I volunteer twice a week at a charity that helps older women facing financial abuse. I tell them my story, not all of it, but enough. Enough that they understand I know what it's like to be seen as a resource instead of a person. Enough that they trust me when I tell them they deserve better. Olivia and I take trips now. Small ones. Weekend getaways to state parks, a long weekend in Chicago to see the museums. We talk more than we ever did. Really talk. About everything and nothing. She's my best friend now. I'm grateful every day that I have one child who saw me clearly. Ethan texts sometimes. Short messages. Hope you're well. Thinking of you. Miss you, Mom. I read them all. Sometimes I respond with a heart emoji. Sometimes I don't respond at all. He never asks for money anymore. I think Serafina finally forbade it after I said no the 5th time. They're struggling. I know because Olivia tells me. They moved out of the condo into a small 2-bedroom apartment across town. Ethan's car got repossessed. Turns out once I stopped making payments, he couldn't keep up with them either. Serafina's fancy law firm let her go during budget cuts. They're both working now, both stressed, both learning what it means to live on what you actually earn, instead of what someone else gives you. I don't feel sorry for them, but I don't feel happy about their struggles either. I just feel separate. Like their lives are happening over there and my life is happening here, and those are two different things now. Sometimes I wonder if Ethan will ever really understand what he did. If he'll ever call and say the words I'm still waiting to hear. I'm sorry, Mom. I'm sorry I took you for granted. I'm sorry I let someone convince me you were the problem. I'm sorry I treated your love like it was worthless. Maybe he will someday. Maybe he won't. Either way, I'm not waiting by the phone anymore. I learned something important through all of this. I learned that you can love someone completely and still refuse to let them destroy you, that boundaries aren't punishments, they're survival, that being a good mother doesn't mean being an ATM with unconditional withdrawals. I learned that I matter, that my life, my peace, my future, they matter just as much as my children's. Maybe more because I'm the only one responsible for protecting them. The door is still open. If Ethan wants to walk through it, really walk through it, not just reach through for money, I'll be here. But I won't beg him, I won't chase him, I won't fund his way back into my life. Because I finally learned to love myself enough to know I deserve better than that. And that might be the most important thing Arthur ever taught me, even if it took me 23 years after his death to remember it. Love without respect isn't love at all. It's just another way of disappearing. I'm done disappearing. I'm here, visible, valuable, free. And that's worth more than any wedding I was never invited to anyway.